shoes on my feet, my identity. My brain never waking from those pills they prescribed to me. We just fancy drugs, going through the motions. Just fancy drugs, going through the motions. Fancy drugs, a fraction me. We just fancy drugs. We just fancy drugs. Oh, fancy drugs, going through the motions. So fracture me. Late at night when I feel alone, I cry in darkness, screaming to the unknown, 'cause she's never coming back. No, she's never coming back. Body and water for days and days, hopes for a safe return were hopes in vain, 'cause she's never coming back. No, she's never coming back. When I was 17, I pretended not to care. Stayed in them for years to escape despair. Your soul dies, you just can't hide it. Everyone can tell. Oh Lord, will I ever feel right again? Tried so hard to be an automaton, body of steel and wired circuits for my backbone, 'cause she's never coming back. No, she's never coming back. Wild turkey in the car seat, the battle's empty. I hope it gave her some relief, 'cause she's never coming back. No, she's never coming back. When I was 17, I pretended not to care. Stayed numb for years to escape despair. Soul dies, you just can't hide it. Everyone can tell. Oh Lord, will I ever feel?
I'm excited to be in the studio today with Amythyst Kiah. She is originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she was raised on folk and string band music and bluegrass, but kind of merged into rock and roll and blues and everything else. I want to talk to you all about that stuff because I'm really fascinated by all the different styles of music you can play.
Yeah. So actually, it is the other way around.
Oh, really? Started
I actually didn't learn about string band music and old time music until I got to college, which historically is not really the most common known way to be introduced to traditional music. Usually it's like it's in your family, and that's how you would learn typically. But with the advent of technology now, you can go on YouTube and type in old time and even start from there. But when I was growing up, so I grew up in the suburbs, and I got into pop punk and Tony Hawk Pro Skater and like all of that stuff. And my parents bought me a guitar when I was 13. But even before I got my guitar, both of my parents had a really strong love for music, and my dad's an audiophile, so he had like a really nice stereo system and a really nice music collection.
Wasn't he also a musician too?
Yeah, he was a musician at one point back in the 70s.
Okay.
He lead sang and played hand percussion for like a local band.
Okay.
And they did a lot of the top 40s of that time. So like, Allman Brothers and Earth, Wind and Fire and stuff like that. And my dad has a beautiful voice. Even now he'll like sing, and he's an excellent whistler too. Gonna try to get some of his whistles on the next album.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, because we never actually like ever recorded or done anything together. So I think it'd be really cool. He's 75, and he's been in my life for a really long time, supporting me with music and stuff. So it would be hopefully we'll get that worked out. But anyway, sorry, back to the story. So I grew up hearing like contemporary jazz and classic country and Southern rock, blues, funk, just listening to everything. My dad's favorite artist is Carlos Santana.
Wow.
And then Prince. I don't know. They might be tied. I'm not sure if there's one he can rank over the other. But yeah, so I just listened to lots of amazing, awesome musicians, wonderful voices. So I really fell in love with Michael Jackson and Mariah Carey and those big voices from the 90s. And then like I mentioned, I got into alternative music. So I got into pop punk, got into Green Day and Blink-182. And then eventually my curiosity would take me to finding my own sort of eclectic way of listening to music. My family, we got a computer about the time I was 13 as well. So I took video lessons. And then I started to explore Kazaa and LimeWire, and so I started. I think the statute of limitations is like hopefully it's gone by now, but I absolutely pirated music and made mixed CDs, and so I got into like new metal. So I really loved Evanescence, and then I got into Scandinavian symphonic metal. So I got into bands like Nightwish and Epica and like. Yeah, so I and then I also got into like Tori Amos and Fiona Apple and Bjork and Radiohead, and so I just really my favorite thing on the planet was to find music and listen, and then learn how to play the songs. That was my big hobby in high school.
I was going to ask you if your dad dragged you into music, but it sounds like you had an interest already.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, literally, it was just a thing of like he would play music, and I, just became interested in it. But then as I got older, I started like, kind of finding my own, like I said, my own little eclectic way of listening to music. So it wasn't really until fairly recently that I've started going back and listening intently to the stuff my dad listened to and been like, oh yeah, this is cool. I mean, not that it wasn't cool before, but you're like, I mean, when you're a mall goth listening to Evanescence, it's hard to like listen to the Isley Brothers, because you're so used to that really heavy kind of in-your-face kind of sound. So it's harder to appreciate other kinds of music that aren't kind of just blasting in your face. But yeah, so in college, that's when I got introduced into bluegrass, old time and country music studies.
Which is kind of, like you said, backwards in a way, because you usually that's where you learn to study classical music. and
Right, exactly. But Jack Tottle is the founder of the Bluegrass Old Time Country Music Studies. He lives in Hawaii now. actually went to visit him fairly recently with me and my now my fiance. We went and visited him. But he was really like, I'm so glad that I called to check into this bluegrass guitar class, because I didn't really want to get into classical because it was just so formal, and there was this emphasis on, oral skills and music theory. And I'd already been playing guitar, and I knew how to listen and read guitar tablature. So in my 19-year-old brain, I was like, I don't need to go through all that. So when I came across bluegrass guitar, I mean, the only image that could come to mind for me for bluegrass was like the Beverly Hillbillies. Like, I had zero knowledge of any of it, or even Appalachian culture, even though I'm Appalachian. I grew up in Chattanooga, but I had no idea about any of the music or any of that stuff. So I called Jack Tottle and said, hey, do I need to learn how to sight read or anything for this class? Because, like, I'm not interested in that. And he laughed, because I don't think anyone's ever asked him that before. And he was like, no, this is an oral tradition. Like, the way you've been learning music that's how we learn here. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. So I took that group guitar class. I learned how to, at that point, I had learned fingerstyle from classical guitar. So even though I learned to flat pick, and then I learned how to do three finger style, fingerstyle really like spoke to me, and rhythm. So I really ended up leaning into rhythm guitar and fingerstyle guitar. And then I played in there's an old time string band that I played in called the ETSU Old Time Pride Band, or East Tennessee State University Old Time Pride Band. So kind of a long name, but and then I started taking clawhammer banjo lessons with a guy named Roy Andrade, who was also my band director as well for several semesters. So I just met some really great people that knew the history of the music. And, I've had people ask me, what was it like to, be in this program with, mostly with pretty much all white people. And I was like, well, I grew up in the suburbs and I went to predominantly white schools. So like that was not an issue for me. I think the other thing though is, and my dad had some concerns in the beginning, because once he started getting interested in the music, and saw that I had talent and wanted to support me as I decided to like jump into this endeavor, he was also concerned because there's this, the stereotype of, like closed-minded backwoods people listen to bluegrass, and white people listen to bluegrass. And you look at the history of how, commercial music was segregated, my dad did have a concern. He was born in 1947. So he is very aware of what can happen, if you're black in an all white setting, especially if it's a closed-minded setting. But fortunately for me, even though like all my teachers were white, they all knew the history. They knew that, West African culture was a huge part of string band music. So
the banjo.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that acceptance, from my teachers, and also from students as well. And I, as time went on, it was one of those things where, I never ever felt unsafe, or I was never overtly treated poorly. I just know that sometimes I would be in some spaces and it would be, sometimes it would be a little cold. But I mean, that's their problem. I had enough people rooting for me that those people didn't really matter. So
how was it to play with our native daughters then, with Rhiannon Giddens and Leyla, McCalla, and Allison Russell?
Yeah, well, it was a really incredible experience because, we were all, able to kind of, share our experiences, being people of color in a space that traditionally is seen as a white space. And I think while it was important for me to have that experience, because that was one of the few things that I wasn't really necessarily able to like relate to people on, which for the most part I was fine with. But I think to have that moment where we're all sort of like, we're all on the same page, we understand that experience. That was a really kind of really formative moment, pivotal moment for me. And then also when I decided to take on the project and, knowing that the subject matter was going to be centered around, the story of the transatlantic slave trade and segregation and all these different things. These are all things that I've always, I've talked about in academic settings or, talking with my dad, but never really engaged in musically. And for me, anytime I've had negative emotions or uncertainty or, just I'm kind of really struggling through emotions about something, either writing a song or playing a song is has a way of, helping me process that. And so for me, this project, while obviously from the creative aspect and from the people I was working with and for the overall message, that was all very important. I think my biggest takeaway was that once I wrote those songs and was able to write those songs with these women, that part of me that was angry about what happened before and kind of had a hard time letting that go, I was able to just let that anger go, and, Black Myself is really about talking about those negative, tragic instances. But then in the final verse, for me, it's about realizing that I wouldn't be able to do what I do today if it wasn't for the struggles that people had before me. And so I'm standing on a lot of shoulders. And I also want to recognize that, like, for us to be playing these songs in front of audiences and for so many people to have been touched by it, Black and white, this was, for me, it was like a very, it was just a very special thing to be able to have so many people just understand and want to understand, and and just being able to talk about those subjects through music. It has a way of disarming people that maybe don't know or maybe have reservations about some of the things. So it was good.
Wasn't Black Myself it won the Folk Alliance International Award for Song of the Year, right?
Yeah.
And a Grammy, too?
Well, it was a nomination. Yeah.
Was.
But yeah, I mean, it just, what's so funny about that is, when I wrote that song, I've always wanted to write songs where anybody can see themselves in the situation. And I was a little worried that because it was specific, and because anything that, if you put the word Black in something, that could really kind of turn off a lot of people, or at least be like, oh, well, this isn't for me. Because we still, so many people still separate themselves by color. And, my dad's always taught me that, like, it's, yes, there is still racism out there. There's sexism. There's all these different things out there. But move through the world seeing people as human beings and have that as your, I guess, the prism that you look through, like, we're all human beings. We're all part of the human species, and how you treat someone, and that should override however they look or whatever they believe in or whatever their skin color is, to not allow these really arbitrary things, be the final judgment of how you treat someone. So for me, even though that song was so specific, and because it was so specific, I had people ask me, am I allowed to sing the song? Am I allowed to cover the song? And it's, and I always tell people, and I understand why they're saying it, and I tell them, like, first of all, you don't need my permission to sing my song. It's out there in the world for everybody to enjoy. So you don't have to ask me permission. I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate you. I know you mean well, but you really, really don't have to ask me. Just, if you love the song, just sing it. Because if you think about Coal Miner's Daughter by, I almost said Sissy Spacek, Loretta Lynn. That was a really good movie. But anyway, if you hear that song by Loretta Lynn, should I not sing it because I'm not a coal miner's daughter? But if you listen to the message of the story, it's the message of the story, not necessarily the details.
Opportunity.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of my big sticking point with that song, or if I ever write any other song again that maybe addresses those issues, this isn't off limits. That's my whole point, my whole message throughout all the music that I play and all the different influences that I allow into my music. Like, this music is awesome, and everybody should just enjoy what they enjoy. And let's throw off all these descriptions and all of these, like, all these identities that we have to tie. Let's just enjoy music,
just music.
That's my whole thing. But yeah.
I'm talking with Amythyst Kiah in the studio. The first 2 songs you did today were from Wary and Strange. The last one you did is brand new.
Yeah,
and
it's a brand new
one.
one.
In fact, this is a debut, a radio debut, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. You may have to check. I don't think I've played this on the radio, but yeah, let's say it is.
And that's going to be
it's going
to be in an upcoming album, hopefully coming out this fall, you think?
Yeah. I'm going to get back in the studio later on this summer, and the idea is to have the album out by fall of next year. But yeah, I did some co-writes earlier this year, and it's the first time I'd ever, other than co-writing obviously with In Our Native Daughters, it was my first time really co-writing since 2018 when I did that project. And I'm happy that I'm not the only one that feels this way, but like sometimes as a songwriter, it's like I don't know, for me, it felt really vulnerable and anxiety inducing to like be in a room with someone I've never met and then just share my deepest inner thoughts, about things that felt really awkward. But I got my A&R guy, Mark Williams at Rounder. He's been amazing and, really listening to me and what's important to me and what I value as a musician and the things that matter to me and, the kinds of music that I really love. And he set up a bunch of different sessions for me. So Monday through Friday, I think back in January, it was like I met with a different person every day. So it was almost like dating, It's like you get to know the person and see if you vibe really well. And fortunately, he did a great job of picking people to work with because I really got along with everybody, and I got something out of each session. This song in particular, Empire of Love, it's a song that I co-wrote with Sean McConnell.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
and
right.
I hadn't heard of him before. But each day every morning when I would get up, I would make it a point to listen to the person I was going to meet up with and then decide which songs I feel like would really be well suited to bring to the session. And for Sean McConnell, I was like, because for this song, I wanted something that was, just like really melodic. And the melody I'd come up with, I wasn't like super crazy about. When I heard his voice, I'm like, there's nothing like a songwriter that also has an amazing voice.
No kidding.
It's it's so good. So anyway, I met at his studio, just 40 minutes outside of Nashville, and we just talked about like philosophy and religion and nature and where you come from and like just all of these things that kind of make up who we are as people and how those things shape our lives. And so then Empire of Love kind of, came out of that. I had some lyrics sort of getting at all of those things. And and then we went to town and it was awesome. So yeah.
Can't wait to hear the album when it comes out.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, congratulations on that. Congratulations on your recent engagement.
Oh, thank you.
Very
Appreciate
happy for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for bringing your band in today and playing these tunes for us. It was really fun to hear you.
Yeah, thank you. We had a lot of fun today.
Good.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.
The Current is public media made possible thanks to member support.